Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Time to wake up and start the weekend. Good morning, Miss Jackie. Good morning, Miss Ann. How was everybody's evening? Besides the fact that it rained here and it's still raining here, that's okay. You know, it was all the more reason to stay inside in the sewing room. Good morning. Good morning, Miss Letha, Miss Kathleen, Miss Terry, Miss Betty, Miss Nancy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Are we ready to learn this morning or expand our horizons into what an overlocker or a serger can do? I know it is a very specific technique. It's not a tool or a use for everybody, but it's kind of neat to know what is out there in terms of how things are done. So hope that you will learn something. And if you do have a serger slash overlocker and you have an elasticator foot, you'll now feel a little more comfortable using it. So yes. Okay. Just going to wait just a few more minutes. Make sure everybody is here this morning. Good morning, Miss Patty, Miss Julia, Miss Joanne. Yes, you can only see the title. You can't see me at the moment. That's the beauty of of the program, is that I can hide myself. But there you go. Good morning. Now you should be able to see me in just a moment. It will pop up. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, chilly. Chilly, chilly, chilly. Yes, we have a little something new. I'm sure that a lot of you probably, if you own an overlocker, not so much current, but if you, like in the Bernina world, if you have an overlocker 1300, 12, 1150, 1200 and back, you probably own an elasticator. It is a foot that came with sergers at the time. Today, they don't. They're an optional accessory because it is a specialized technique, and most people aren't using the elasticator, especially for my quilters. We use it to finish the edges of our fabric, maybe do some roll hemming, that type of thing, but we very rarely use an elasticator. So they are not a standard accessory for with the current machines. So my Burnett's, my L series, L4 series, and L8 series, they are optional. So yes. Good morning. Yes, Miss Joanne, here's my coffee. I know it's bad. I really got to learn to kick this habit. Yes. Miss Joanne, if you have it, it's probably still in the plastic baggie inside the clear zip top accessory bag. that came with the serger, because I'm pretty sure that's where most people's are, still in that accessory bag with the spool caps and the oiler and all the other things, because that's where mine lives, to be honest. I don't use an elasticator often, but I just may have to start. All right, so let's get started this morning, and let's get my face out of this so that we can see here. So what is an elasticator? Okay, that's really the question. So the elasticator is a presser foot that goes on the overlocker, and it is designed to stretch the elastic as it's being sewn on. So ultimately, it keeps you from having to pull elastic, because typically when we are sewing an elastic for like a waistband or a crib sheet, which is where this is probably would be used most often, you would be pulling the elastic so that once it got sewn or serged in, it would return to normal, and then it would gather. So this foot has this little, I always said it's the foot that reminds me of like a steamroller. It's what you see them when they're paving the roads and whatnot. So the elastic gets fed into this foot, and then this little roller, which you can tighten or loosen, will stretch the elastic at a constant tension while it's being serged. Okay, so you do have that adjustment screw that gives you the ability to have an infinite amount of adjustment in terms of a lot of stretch, a little stretch, medium stretch, as well as there is a guide that is built in there to help keep the elastic straight, so that it kind of stays where it belongs. So it pretty much keeps it within this area, and it doesn't want to slide out. We would be using this in home furnishings, lingerie, swimwear, sportswear. So let's think. The leg holes of swimsuits, underwear, things along that, waistbands, home furnishings like bar stool covers, crib sheets, fitted sheets in general. This is where you would use an elasticator. Okay. I can find my mouse here. So here's that built-in guide that I was talking about. This presser foot that you're looking at here is the elasticator for the new 8 series machines. This foot is the elasticator for the L4 series, so the 450 and the 460, and it is very similar also to the elasticator that was for the previous models. And I have one of those here in my hand that I will show you here in a moment. So this one is a little bit different guide, but it is adjustable, so you can adjust it. Designed to be and work best with elastic tapes that are anywhere from 5 to 12 millimeters wide. Okay, it's about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, for the L8 series, this presser foot can actually do up to 20 millimeter wide elastic. So you're looking at closer to 3/4 of an inch. Okay, but that 5 to 12 is going to give you 1/4 to 1/2 inch, which is what is pretty standard for lingerie and what you would use in a crib sheet. This is not a foot that you would be using, really wide elastic, 1.5 to 2 inch waistband elastic for. Okay. Okay. So we do find it easier to load the foot with the elastic before you put it on the machine, but it can be loaded after. Okay, it snaps onto the machine just like all the other presser foot. Okay, and then the elastic would be fed in. Okay, on the L4 and the L8 series Berninas, okay, you kind of lift the little roller section and you slide the elastic in from the left. Okay, underneath the roller and then underneath the foot. And I'll show that here in just one moment. And then the B4 40 series. That's my Burnett 42, 44, and 48. It has a guide that can be adjusted. You just need to thread the elastic into the slot, which goes underneath the roller. So there is this foot, and it's a pretty standard presser foot. If you don't own a Bernina or a Burnett, it's a standard presser foot for all makes and models. Okay, not a standard, but it's not a specialized foot. I would be pretty shocked if an Overlocker did not have one of these feet as an option. So this just kind of gives you an idea here as to how that particular foot is going to look on the machine with the elastic fed into the presser foot. Okay. So let's look at a foot. So here, this is, let me get myself in the shot here. This is the Elasticator. So for those that own a Bernina 1300, 1100, 1150, 1200 serger, this is what your foot looks like from the side. This is what it looks like from the front. And this is where that little steamroller thing is. And then this is the screw that adjusts the guide. So to thread the foot, we would open up. So we would push up on the guide. We slide the elastic in and through the bottom of the presser foot. Okay? And then you can snap the roller down. You want to make sure that you guide it into the foot and move it over so that this is where your needles are going to be. So obviously we need the elastic to be towards what would be the right hand side of the foot, okay, so that it can get caught in the elastic. And then if you kind of give the elastic a pull from the back, you can kind of feel how loose or tight this adjustment screw is going to pull on the fabric. Like I can pull that, and I'm actually pulling the elastic out. So that's a very loose. And then if I tighten it up, so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, that's barely moving. So there'll be a lot of stretch that's happening on that. So it is adjustable. I would also use the small screwdriver, and I would slide this guide here to the right. So let me grab, let's see if there's a screwdriver in here. So I would slide this little guide here over so that it stayed right next to my elastic so that my elastic can't slide or work its way to the left. Okay. What kind of elastic can we use? I mean, this is just knit elastic. You could use braided elastic. When I use knits, a lot of times, or even like lingerie, we'll use clear elastic, just so it's a little more hidden. You can't see it. You'll also find this a lot of times in shoulder seams of t-shirts. If you've ever noticed this elastic in the, you can put some elastic in the shoulder seams to keep it, to stabilize it. All right, so that way they don't stretch. All right, let's check volume. Can you hear me now? All right. According to my monitor here, okay, sorry about that. I need not to move. Just sit still, Amy. Just sit still. So, again, you can use elastic types pretty much as long as it goes into the foot in terms of width. You can use knit, braided, I use clear a lot of times for, this is where you would see it too with lingerie, leg holes. A lot of times in swimwear, it's clear elastic. So just, because they don't make elastic in every color in the world. You can also see this sometimes in shoulder seams of like some knit t-shirts, especially if the knit's got a lot of pull in it. This will help stabilize to keep it from drooping. Okay. And so you can also use twill tape and things like that. But the twill tape in the shoulder seam, again, they don't make it in 1,000 colors. And this is clear and blends in. So you can also use clear elastic. Okay. You can also use on the machines, you can use a cover stitch. Okay. And when we use a cover stitch technique with elastic and the elasticator, we typically use what we call, it's like lingerie elastic. And this is usually pretty elastic, okay? Elastic that, you don't mind seeing, that you would leave and keep from having to finish that particular edge. We would cover stitch over top of this so it would put 2 straight stitches through. And so this is the type of elastic that I would use if I was going to use the cover stitch technique, okay? And then just so that my L8 series machines can see, you just lift up, you're going to feed the elastic so it goes through here and comes out the bottom. So it would be in and out so that comes through the bottom. I know it's hard to see that clear elastic. And then I can adjust my tape guide to be matching the size, and then I can adjust my screw and adjust how tight. Okay. So what stitch do we use on these particular feet, this foot? Typically, most of us are going to use a 4-thread overlock. You can also use a 3-thread overlock, okay? So 4-thread is just it's that secured stitch. It's got that extra needle stitching in it to help keep, we call it a security stitch or a safety seam, okay? Or you can use any overlock variation. So 3-thread overlock. You can use the super stretch stitch, which there's a typo there, so I apologize. And then you can also use a cover stitch. So for my 1300, my L890, my L220, and my B42 and 48, which have cover stitch options, you could use the cover stitch. Typically a 2-thread narrow cover stitch would be what you would use, but it's also going to depend upon the thickness of your elastic. Now, yes, you do want the guide to just be touching the edge of the elastic. You don't want it to be too tight because then your elastic won't feed, but you don't want it to be too far away because then your elastic can move on you and then could accidentally slip out of the location of the needles. Okay. Now, for some of you, you may not know, you may have a serger that you were given or, that type of thing. And you're frustrated with it and you don't understand. Did you know that sergers have to be threaded in a particular order? Okay. This goes for every serger except for the new Air Thread L850 and 890. Okay, there's not a particular order on those 2 machines, but pretty much on every serger in the world, or overlocker in the world, there is a right way and a wrong way to thread a serger, and that is not threading it in the right order. Okay, so if you look at this image here, you see it is color 1 is the blue, so that's your upper looper goes first. Okay, so think of the, like the sky, so upper looper first. Lower looper is the red, so that's the thread that goes on the underside of your looper, and that is, I always say it's red like the dirt. And then your needles, you work from right to left. Okay. And if you know, and have ever taken a class with me or Wendy over a serger, we have a little song, right? Upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. And so that if you thread the serger in that particular order, you will be pretty successful at getting a stitch that works right. Okay. A lot of times if a stitch is not forming right, some of it could be the order in which you threaded and things along that line. So just a little foray into, I don't know how a serger knows it wasn't threaded in the right order. I have no clue, but it does. And it will work better if you thread it upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. I learned that song and dance from Miss Casey Aldaney from 19 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. So when we thread, after we thread the machine, okay, to set up the stitch, you need to adjust your cutting width so that you leave enough seam or fabric in your seam allowance so that your elastic has some place to go. We typically increase the stitch length on the stitch. Usually we go as high as we can, so usually up to a 4, so that we can have the greatest amount of stretch. And I have a machine set up, and I'll show you. And then you can adjust the tension control of the elasticator on top of the foot. I would do it in short increments and quarter to half turns until you get the desired effect. You may need to make some sample pieces, especially if you know that you need to gather something and it needs to gather with the elastic to half its size. You may need to do some samples. When you are a tip, lower the thread knife, and I don't typically lower the thread knife until I come back around, especially if I'm sewing something in a loop. When I get back to where I started, I will lower my thread knife and my cutting knife so that I don't accidentally cut the elastic that is already serged in while I finish my seam. So Miss Joanna has a question that says, what happens if your third thread breaks? Do you need to start over? I don't typically start all the way over. I will thread it, and I will thread the thread that broke and then test it. And then if it's not right, then yes, start over. And nobody says you have to completely unthread. Just cut your thread tails, tie a knot, and pull through. Okay. All right. So let's look at how we would put like a 1/4 inch elastic into woven fabric. So this would be cotton fabric. Okay. And so we would set the machine up for a 4-thread overlock. We'd attach the foot, okay, that we've put elastic into. Our stitch length goes to 4 millimeters. Our cutting width we take all the way up to 8. And then we're going to position the fabric in front of the knife so that about 1/8 of an inch falls off the edge, so that we're going to cut about 1/8 of an inch. If you needed to sew it in at 5/8, then you would line up at 5/8. But if you are testing and just making examples, you just need to cut a little bit of fabric off. And then start making adjustments, okay? Turn the adjustment screw on the top of the foot, sew some, and make an adjustment. It is nice to begin sewing with the needles in the elastic. So this is when I load my foot with elastic, I pull it back long enough for a tail so that my stitching will start in the elastic versus trying to get it started, okay? And then keep adjusting, and then you get to the end of the seam, you can just sew right off the fabric edge and trim your elastic flush. Okay. And give me 1 second. And then, all right, let's go look at the machine. Okay. I'm gonna try not to mess with the microphone while I move. Okay. So I have here on the machine, I have a foot is threaded, okay, and we are, give me 1 second. make sure that that is, there we go. It's live. So I have a foot on the machine with a 1/4 inch elastic loaded into it already. So I have lifted the front of the foot, the elastic is loaded in, and I've pulled the tail all the way to the back so that my needles will immediately stitch into the seat, into the elastic. I have my stitch length on the side of my machine over here is at a 4. My differential feed on the machine, remember that's the speed of your feed dogs, is going to stay just fine at just regular where it's at. Okay, and I'm going to lift my foot here so that I can start. And I have adjusted my cutting width, my knife, okay, to an 8, and we're going to stitch. So I'm going to get the fabric on here, and then we can start making some small 1/4 turn, 1/2 turn adjustments to the elastic. And you can see that it's already gathering up here. You do need to kind of watch the, make sure that you're staying with your seam allowance, that your elastic is staying, it's not sliding or slipping. You almost have to be ambidextrous in holding multiple pieces at once here. Okay. All the way off. Go off the edge. Slide that out. Okay. You see that your elastic is, I have yellow thread in the machine. Okay. And then I can pull that out and then let it go. So if this was a garment or a leg hole, we would then pull this, we would fold that over, and we would either top stitch it on the sewing machine or cover stitch it on the serger, and then you would have a nice leg hole casing, okay, on the machine. Okay. That makes sense, I hope. So just so you can see again. Get this microphone. There it is. You can see that at the beginning, it's not quite as much. And then as I increased the adjustment on the presser foot, it gathered more and more. Because we have left it at a large stitch length, that gives me lots and lots of room to be able to pull on that and stretch it out all the way. And again, if this was a garment, we would be folding this over. We would then be stretching this so that it was flat, and we would be stitching into the straight of the elastic so that when it folded back over, you'd have a nice finished edge of a leg hole in a, think of like diaper covers, pantaloons, that type of thing, swimwear, all that. So that's an elasticator. Okay. Now, let's look at putting it into knit fabric. Now, knit fabric is, you could do the same thing that we just did, but if you have something along the lines of like a performance knit or anything like that, you may want to look at using the super, let's see, we're just going to get rid of that. Can everybody hear me now? I can talk louder if that's the problem. All right. we'll figure out. We'll figure out sound eventually. We will then set the machine up for a super stretch stitch. Okay, so that super stretch stitch on an overlocker is actually a 2-thread stitch. It uses one looper and one needle, and it wraps the lower looper all the way around. So it's got a lot of give to it. We typically use a maxi lock, woolly nylon, some sort of stretch that has some sort of thread that has a lot of stretch to it. Okay. Again, clear elastic is what a lot of us use when we're doing this in knit. Set up your stitch length and your cutting width just like we did before. Load it into the machine and do the same thing. Okay. Nothing changes with the way that you generally use do the stitch or do the technique of putting an elastic. It's just a matter of choosing the stitch that you want to use for it. Okay. And then lingerie elastic with cover stitching. Okay. Again, we're going to use the cover stitch. Typically a narrow is recommended. Okay. So the narrow cover stitch is going to use the left and center needle, right and center needle. Okay. Again, I typically will thread with the stretch thread, woolly nylon maxi lock stretch. Adjust the tape guide in the foot, load it in, and then set yourself up. You do want to loosen the looper tensions when you are cover stitching, or the looper tension, because there's only one looper, just so that you are allowing the stretch, okay? If they're too tight, it won't allow any stretch, so we need it to be a little looser. And then put your fabric underneath. Always start with, when you are cover stitching, whether it's with elastic or not, you always start your needles down in the fabric, okay? And in this place, it would be down in the elastic and the fabric, okay? And then we sew or cover stitch and then work through that, okay? And then sew all the way around. Typically, when we are cover stitching, it really works best if we can do it when the item is flat, okay, rather than in the round, just because the overlap in the elastic can be a little bulky, and because we're doing it with cover stitching, it's not meant to be folded over and kind of hidden. We just do that, and so typically, like if this was a pair of pants or something, we would cover stitch the elastic in and then fold in half and seam. So like a slip, okay? We would do this across the top of the rectangle and then fold it in half and sew down the side to give you your tube that would be your slip in that aspect, okay? And then finally, do we have questions? I think I answered most of them. I do apologize for sound issues. I'll figure this all out yet. There is a couple of, let me see if I can get it to launch here, and then I will add a browser so that you can see. On the We All Sew blog, there is the link that will be here, but you can also just go to weallsew.com, okay, and you can see, let me get this over here so you can see it. There's a crib sheet tutorial, okay, that walks you through how to use the Elasticator to make a crib sheet, okay, which is great, especially if you can't find crib sheets that are going to coordinate or match the theme of a room, okay? And then I've also included a link to the tutorial video that Bernina has put up explaining the Elasticator as well, okay? It's just a little, there's no talking music little videos that they do with all words. That's there. Now, do I have any other questions? Well, I hope that was a little informative. Maybe we'll have you, if you have an elasticator, it'll get you to take it out and maybe just play with some, experimenting with some of the scrap pieces of elastic you may have. Try putting it in knit, try putting it in home deck, because the amount of adjustment or tension you need to put on that roller is also going to depend upon the fabric. So, you know, a lightweight cotton is going to gather much easier with a lesser stretch on the elastic versus doing this into a particular home deck weight fabric. So you may have to make additional adjustments. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody joining me here this morning. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out with me for a little bit. I hope, again, you found this informative, and we will see you soon. If not here in the store, maybe next Friday at Live or next Saturday at Virtual Breakfast Club for, next Saturday's an Acu quilt. So we're going to talk about cubes and what cubes are and why you need them. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Stay warm, stay dry, and get some sewing done today. Thanks. Bye.